Hey there. It's me, Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the comment, thanks. Thursday was our first vacation day and we had decided to not waste a minute. We arose early and took a cab downtown to see the opening of the stock exchange, and after watching the flurry of activity for a while we went down to the ferry crossing and took the boat over to Staten Island and back. It was too cold to stay out on the open deck and I hoped that I could make this trip again during nice weather. Next we took a subway uptown and then took the shuttle train over to Grand Central Station. I'd always wanted to visit Grand Central since seeing the movie A North by Northwest. By then it was lunchtime, so we walked up the wide stairway that led to street level and went outside to find a deli where we could eat. We found what looked like a popular place a block away and went inside. If we had had to go any further in the freezing cold wind, we would have given up and found a cab. The lox sandwiches and blintzes were great and we left the deli sated. Our afternoon travels took us to the World Trade Towers and an antiques show at the Jacob Javits Convention Center. We ate dinner at a German restaurant uptown before going back to the hotel. The message light was lit on the telephone when we got back to our room. Mom called down and got the message and then placed the call to Mr. Daniels while Carol and I took our coats off and warmed up. We went back into the living room to listen to Mom's side of the conversation. When she got off the phone she smiled and said, "Well, it looks like we'll be here for another 3 weeks." Carol and I shrieked and hugged each other. Mom joined us and we all hugged. Carol said, "That means that Cry's got the movie part, right? It's not a different job?" She got the movie part. She starts work on Monday. Rehearsals will be held in the theater that we visited yesterday, and then they'll move outside to the location for the actual shooting. The pay for doing the movie is $300,000. Mr. Daniels said that it's so low because you're still a relative unknown. Low? Carol said. It's a fortune. After the government takes half and the agency get its 10%, it leaves only $120,000. But it's a nice addition to the college fund. We can use it, along with the money from the commercials, to pay off the mortgage on the condo so we can stop paying interest. It doesn't seem like it's worth it to have the condo now, I said. I haven't gotten any work in California since the series ended. Mr. Daniels says that he can get you work there, but you have to be there. If you get famous, you can live wherever you want, but until then you have to go to interviews and tests like you just did for this next job. You wouldn't have gotten this job if we weren't here in the city. And with Carol going to USC, the condo gives her a place to live without having to move into a dorm. I thought about it afterwards and realized that Mom was right. It had been months since any interest had been directed my way, and then I got this job after being in New York for less than 2 weeks. Maybe the only way to get more work was to move to New York or California. On Friday we made the rounds of the museums. A script with my scenes was left at the front desk while we were out. Saturday was devoted to finishing up the homework assignments that we had brought so that we wouldn't have to worry about it during the next week. Mom would call the school on Monday and get more assignments for us since we were going to be here longer than the 3 weeks that we had originally planned for. I spent Sunday rehearsing my lines in front of a mirror where I could practice my expressions. The limo picked us up at 7 on Monday and took us to the theater. We started working at 8 by having a short meeting to discuss the shooting schedule, and then we started rehearsing the first scene. It was to take place outdoors and it showed Cole and I meeting by accident after not having seen each other since we broke up. We would walk along talking about the rough spots that we had had in our relationship. Most of my scenes were with Cole, but I also had a scene with the co-star of the movie, Heidi Morris. In the afternoon I was measured by a wardrobe person, and then it was back to rehearsals again as we worked on our timing. We continued until almost 5 o'clock and then broke for the day. I would come back on Tuesday for wardrobe work and we would start shooting on Wednesday. On Wednesday the limo picked us up at 6 a.m. and brought us to the first location, up in the Bronx, instead of to the theater. There were a number of trailers there for equipment transportation, dressing rooms, crew use, and makeup. I was shown to my trailer dressing room and a wardrobe person came to assist me immediately. When I was dressed I was taken to makeup. As soon as I was ready I was taken back to the dressing room and told that I would be called shortly. I must have waited for an hour, but at least I got a chance to enjoy a cup of tea while I was waiting. While I was waiting inside, the extras in the cast were being organized on the street so that they would know their positions and movements once the action started. I was finally called, and I met with Mr. Willis and Cole. We did several walkthroughs before Mr. Willis decided to go for a take. The lights were turned on, the sound people moved in with their equipment, and the extras were cued. We spent the entire morning working on that one scene. Early on, the trouble seemed to be with the extras. Either they were out of position or they were staring into the camera. We had several jets fly overhead, which totally drowned out our dialogue to the extent that we couldn't even hear our cues, and several instances of police cars, ambulances, and a fire engine which messed up the sound as well. During one take, Cole slipped on some ice and fell. Fortunately he wasn't hurt, and also fortunately he wasn't holding on to me at the time. It might have been funny if we weren't all so cold. Several of the takes involved miscues or speech problems. After the establishing shots were done we had to do the close-ups. We finally put together enough good takes by 1 p.m. to consider the scene done, and we ended for the day. Although we had taken a couple of breaks to warm up, my feet were freezing. I had been given stiletto-heeled boots with leather soles to wear and they didn't have any insulation value at all. As soon as we broke, Mom filled a pan with warm water and I soaked my feet. I had begun to think that they would never be warm again. A production assistant had taken lunch orders so a hot meal was delivered shortly after that. Mom had ordered me a hot pastrami sandwich and a salad and I wound up eating about half of each. When I was warm and full I felt much better. After eating I changed into my own clothes and we left. The crew had worked hard to clear the street of equipment and everything was almost back to normal and the trucks were being loaded. The limo had been called while I ate and it was ready to take us back to the hotel. On Thursday, we worked on a different scene at a different location. The shooting went pretty much like the first day, but the lighting was more critical, so we were pressed harder to get it right while the sun and the shadows it caused were in the right place. We couldn't take the breaks as we had yesterday, so while we were done earlier, I felt more miserable from the cold. I didn't have to work on Friday, so I stayed in the hotel and stayed warm for a change. On Saturday I went to the theater so that we could rehearse next week's scenes. There would be 2 more outdoor scenes this week, one on Monday and the other Wednesday, weather permitting. The other days would be spent on a studio set. We worked until almost 6 p.m. Mr. Willis was a perfectionist and the more time that we spent here would mean less time with a full crew around us later. We only took a half hour for lunch and 2 15-minute breaks during the day. By the time that we left for our return to the hotel I was exhausted. Sunday was a day of rest, but I spent a lot of time in front of the mirror practicing my lines for the coming week. Carol was starting to get bored and spent a lot of time watching television with Mom. If we had been in California, she could at least have sunbathed by the pool. Monday was another day of freezing while trying to ignore the cold and remember lines, movements, and facial expressions. At least the shooting day was short since the sun rose late and set early. On Tuesday we worked in a studio to give everyone a break from the cold. The scene was set in a deli and Cole was supposed to stop in for lunch and see me eating as I read a book. After getting his lunch at the counter, he comes over to my table and sits down. We spent the morning getting the establishing shots in the can and then concentrated on the close-ups and the dialogue in the afternoon. I didn't have much of an appetite when we broke for lunch because of all the food that I had eaten during the earlier shooting. I had a small waste paper can next to me and out of sight, and every time Mr. Willis yelled "cut," I spit whatever was in my mouth into the can. In spite of that, I had still swallowed a small amount with each take. Wednesday found us outside again. This time we were up on an elevated train platform. The cold had been bad enough in the street, but on the platform we were subjected to the wind constantly. They erected a canvas enclosure like a tent, with huge heaters, out of sight of the cameras where we could warm up between takes. The thin leather soles of the boots kept my feet cold all morning. I was ecstatic when Mr. Willis announced that we were done. My feet ached as I walked down the steps of the elevated platform. So much for the glamorous life of an actress, I thought. Someone had forgotten to tell the weather people that mid-March is almost the beginning of spring. Mom fixed a pan of warm water for me to soak my feet in. I had never lost feeling in my feet or toes, so I didn't suffer any frostbite, but it sure felt like I came close. By the time that we were ready to leave, the crew had almost finished loading the trucks. Thursday and Friday were spent working indoors at the studio, and we were back at the theater on Saturday for our final rehearsal session. I had become friends with Cole during the past 2 weeks of work, and now I had a chance to meet Heidi Morris when we practiced our scene together. Our scene was supposed to be a confrontation between Cole's former girlfriend and his current girlfriend. I was glad that it would take place inside. On Sunday, I stayed at the hotel and worked on schoolwork. Carol had had time to do hers while I was working, so she and Mom relaxed and watched television or read. We only worked outdoors on Tuesday in my final week with the company. Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday were spent working at the studio, and included doing some voiceover work on my final day. When we broke for the day on Thursday, my role in the picture was over. There was always the possibility that I could be called back for more scenes once the editing started, but it was unlikely. I thanked Mr. Willis for his help and direction, and I thanked Mr. O'Brien for selecting me for the job before I left. They both said they were happy to have had me in their picture, and that I had done a wonderful job. I was glad to be done with the job, but only because of the outside work. The rest of it I loved. Still, it would be nice to get home after 5 weeks in New York City during the winter. It certainly wasn't any warmer at home, but it was home. And I wouldn't be standing outdoors for hours at a time in clothing that wasn't appropriate for long exposure. We arrived home Friday afternoon. It took hours for the house to warm up from the 45 degrees that Mom had set the thermostat to when we left. We wore our winter coats until it reached 60, and then we wore sweaters until it reached 68, our normal household temperature. Carol didn't waste any time in putting out the word that she was back. She spent practically every minute until dinner talking on the phone, and then resumed right after the dishes were done. I didn't even bother to ask for my share of the telephone time. I relaxed and watched some television with Mom instead. Since today was Friday, we would have the entire weekend to get back into our normal routines. At 9 o'clock I went upstairs and put on a nightgown. Wearing my bathrobe, I returned to the living room for another hour's worth of television before going to bed. Mom always stayed up to watch the late-night shows, either Letterman or Leno, on weekends, so at 10 o'clock I kissed her goodnight and went up to bed. As I waited for sleep to overtake me, I thought about the movie scenes, going over each one in my mind, trying to think of what I could have done to make my performance better. I was still thinking about the movie when I finally fell asleep, which might have accounted for the dream that I had. I dreamt that I was really Cole's ex-girlfriend. More than that, I dreamt that I secretly wanted him back and I was plotting ways of getting rid of Heidi. I woke up in a cold sweat on a soggy pillow. I went to the bathroom and washed my face, then returned to bed and used my second pillow, placing the first one where it could dry out. It took me a while to fall asleep again, but I didn't have any more nightmares that I could remember the following morning. One was quite enough, thank you. I awoke early in the morning and went downstairs after washing my face. The sun was still low on the horizon as I prepared some premix for pancakes. There wasn't any fresh food in the house since we had been gone for 5 weeks, but we had the premix and frozen OJ concentrate. I took a glass of OJ to the table to wait for someone else to come down, and while I waited I looked through an old copy of Cosmo that was on the table. Mom was the first one to appear, and I got up to turn on the heat under the frying pan while she made a pot of tea. Just as the first pancakes were ready to be flipped, Carol came down, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She poured a glass of OJ and plopped down into a chair at the table. I dished up the 4 pancakes when they were ready and poured out another group, taking the first batch to the table for Mom and Carol before returning to watch the others. The next group was ready in a few minutes and I scooped them up and poured the remainder of the batter into the pan. When the final 4 pancakes were ready, I turned off the burner and carried the platter to the table. Carol and Mom were still eating the ones that I had brought over first as I sat down. I poured syrup over the 3 that I took and started eating also, but I should have finished my OJ before getting into the maple syrup. Nothing makes OJ taste as bitter as when you eat super sweet syrup first. Since I had cooked, Carol had to clean up. I went upstairs to take a bath as soon as we had finished breakfast. As the tub filled, I poured in the bath crystals and oil that I always used. I slipped off my nightgown and slid into the frothy water, enjoying the sensation of the warmth on my body. I relaxed in the tub until the water began to chill a little, then added a little bit more hot water and started washing my body. I ran the razor over my legs to remove all traces of stubble and then did my armpits as well. By the time that the water was chilling again, I was ready to get out. As the tub drained, I used an oversized bath towel to dry myself off and knocked on Carol's door to let her know that I was through. As I finished and hung the towel up to dry, she came into the bathroom and began running her bath. Carol followed me into my room while the tub filled. She sat on my bed as I powdered my body. She said, "Sherry and Heather are coming over later. Want to go to the mall with us?" "Thanks, no. I guess that I'll go to the grocery store with Mom. Say hi to Sherry and Heather for me. Is it okay if I talk about the movie that you're in?" "I guess so. Nobody said that it was a secret or anything. Not that it could be after all the shooting on the city streets." "Okay." Carol went to the bathroom to check on her bath and I heard her getting into the water. Before dressing, I checked myself over in my full-length mirror. My breasts were continuing to grow and I wondered how large they would get. The medicine that I had been given when I had the surgical procedure to give me the simulated vagina and to control sexual responses must be adding to the continued changes in my body. It had been 9 months since I had first had the faux breasts applied to my chest and my voice had not changed, but my body sure had. My tush was now a soft mass of flesh where it had been tight with muscle before. My arms and legs had also grown soft, but that might be because I no longer rode my bike each day as I had before. I now wore a C-cup padded bra to support the real breasts that had sprouted from my chest as a result of the adhesive that was used to attach the faux breasts, and at the rate that they were continuing to grow, I wouldn't need the padding of the bra by summertime. There still wasn't a single hair growing on my face, so I guessed that I would be able to continue in my disguise for a while yet. It was important that I make enough money to both pay for Carol's and my education plus pay for the costs to return my body to look like a male's, if that was even possible. If my beard never grew, I would continue to look like a woman for the rest of my life because of the shape of my face. I had seen several women in New York City who were trying to appear mannish, but their features, and the total lack of facial hair or the hint of a 5 o'clock shadow, always gave them away. Lately I had also begun to worry that my fame might prevent me from changing. It might be better to stay as a woman than to have people pointing fingers at me for the rest of my life if I suddenly became a man. Again, I had to stop and remind myself that I would be becoming a man again. More and more I was forgetting that I had been a male once. It was only when I stopped and thought about my changes that I remembered that I had been a male once. And that I still had a remnant of my original gender, even if it was sewn up inside of me and hidden by the surgically constructed simulated vagina. I looked down and examined the doctor's handiwork. My pubic hair had grown out, and from an external view my simulated vagina was the real thing. I put on a pair of panties and a bra. It was frustrating in that even if I wanted to, I couldn't have sex as either a female or a male, and I had chosen to remain this way until I had the money that we needed. Since there was nothing to be done about it, I shrugged my shoulders and got dressed. I put on normal clothes since I would be going out in disguise. I heard Carol getting out of the tub as I went downstairs. Mom wasn't in the kitchen, so she must be upstairs bathing and getting ready to go out. I sat down at the kitchen table and began reading the Cosmo article that I had started earlier. I sat there until Mom came down, and then we got ready to leave for the market. Mom yelled up to Carol that we were leaving and got an okay in response. It was cold outside, but I had worn warm boots today instead of the decorative ones that I had worn for the movie shooting. I also didn't expect to be standing on snow or ice for hours. The market wasn't crowded and I probably didn't even need my disguise, but I felt sure that no one would recognize me with my dark wig and normal clothes. Mom and I walked through the market selecting items and filling the cart with fresh vegetables, fruits, meats, and dairy products. We also picked up a few staples that we were low on. After we had returned home and put the food away, I didn't know what to do with myself. I had completed all of my work assignments for school and I didn't have any work scripts to study. I had tried to call Debbie, but she wasn't home. I probably should have called Brad to let him know that I was back, but I didn't. I began to wish that I had gone to the mall with Carol, Sherry, and Heather. It was still before 11 a.m., so after checking the bus schedule, I hurried to get my hat and coat on. I said goodbye to Mom and rushed down to the bus stop just as the bus arrived. The driver was Fred, and he saw right through my disguise, but didn't say my name out loud. "Good morning, Mississippi. It's nice to see you again." "Good morning, Fred. It's nice to see you again also." "Going to the downtown area today," he said, meaning the theater. "No, just the library, Fred." "Okay, Mississippi." 15 minutes later I was walking into the library. Fred had dropped me right at the front door. There was a time when I had practically lived here after school and on weekends, but I hadn't been here since last summer just after the play at the community theater opened. Teresa was working at the front counter, but I just continued on past and headed to the fiction section. I wandered up and down the aisles, glancing at the titles, picking up an occasional book here and there and reading the first page. Most of them I put back, but I did collect a small pile of books and I took them to a table near the back of the library, where I sat down and began reading. I narrowed my selections down to 2 books and put the rest back before taking them to the counter. Teresa took my card without even looking up and started to process my books, but suddenly stopped when she saw my name and looked up. "Miss Ramsey, is that you?" "Hi, Teresa. How have you been?" "It is you. I didn't recognize you with the wig." "Hi. I'm fine. It's been a long time since you were in. You were wonderful in the television series. I'm so sorry that it ended." "It's okay. It happens all the time. No series goes on forever. Do you have anything new coming up?" "No, not at present. I just finished some commercials and I had a small part in a movie starring Cole Griffith and Heidi Morris." "Oh my God, Cole Griffith, I love him. Did you get to meet him?" "Yes, I played his ex-girlfriend. We had a number of scenes together." "Oh, you are so lucky. I'll bet that was so cool." I smiled, thinking about the ice and the freezing cold wind. That's putting it mildly. Our talking had attracted the attention of the other librarians, and Sylvia and Elizabeth came over. Even Mrs. Parker came out of her office. Fortunately, the library was almost deserted because they made such a big deal when they realized who I was. I had to tell them all what I had been doing for the past 6 months. Of course, they already knew about the television series and the school play. I was finally able to get away after about 15 minutes by using the excuse that my bus was coming, which was true. I had to hurry to get to the bus stop or wait another 30 minutes. The bus came just as I reached the bus stop. Once I got home, I turned the radio on in my bedroom and relaxed on the bed to read. Shortly after 4 o'clock, Mom called up to me that I had a phone call. It was Brad. "Hi, Brad."
"Hi, babe.
"I just learned that you were back. Johnny said Pete saw Carol at the mall. How come you didn't call to tell me? We just got back last night." "I've been busy getting settled back in." "Okay, I'll forgive you, hon. How about going out tonight?" "No, I can't. I'm too tired. The last few weeks have been hectic. I just need to rest today." "How come you were gone so long? I thought that you were coming back weeks ago." I spent the next hour giving him the details of our trip and I told him all about the commercials and the movie. "Wow, a movie with Heidi Morris. That's awesome. When's it coming out?" "I don't know. They're not even done shooting it yet. I guess that it won't be for at least 3 months. June then. I guess. They have to finish shooting and then do the editing." "Will you be going to the premiere?" "No. I only had a small part in the movie. Just 3 weeks out of several months of shooting." "Well, I can't wait to see it anyway." "What was its name? A Promise of Spring?" "I'll take you to see it when it comes to town." "Okay, if I'm here." "What do you mean? Are you going away again?" "If I get a job, I'll be going wherever it takes me. It can happen very quickly, like this last job did. Carol will be entering USC in September, and we still don't have all the money that we need. So far, I've only earned enough to get her part way through 4 years. A few more small jobs like this last one would do it though. Then we'd better make the most of the time that you're here. How about going to the movies tomorrow afternoon? I knew that Brad wouldn't give up until I gave in, so I said, in the most enthusiastic-sounding voice that I could, "Okay, what time?" "I'll pick you up at 1:30. The matinee starts at 2. We talked for about another 20 minutes until Mom called me for dinner. I said
Goodbye
to Brad and went into the kitchen. I don't know where your sister is, but I'm not going to hold dinner for her. She knows what time we eat. Would you finish setting the table, please? Sure, Mom. I put the plates and silverware out and then got out the milk and butter. Mom took the ham and potato casserole out of the oven and put it on the table. She put the cut green beans into a small serving bowl and brought them over and sat down. We were halfway through the meal when Carol arrived home. Sorry, I'm late. I lost track of the time because I hadn't seen anybody for the past 5 weeks. Cries, there's a car show at the mall and they're playing the commercials that you made in New York. I couldn't believe that they have them already. They also have full-size cardboard cutouts of you. People are paying $5 a piece to have their picture taken with you. I mean with your picture. But it looks like it's with you. Really? $5 each? I swear to God. Amazing. It's not surprising that the commercials are out. It's been more than 4 weeks since they were shot. How much did you get paid for those? I don't know. Mom? Mr. Daniels said something around $50,000, 30 for the car commercial and 20 for the tuna fish. Plus you get something every time they play one on television. What about them playing it at the mall? Or using cardboard cutouts to make money selling pictures? Carol asked. I don't know. Probably nothing. How about if we did it? Did what? Make a cardboard picture of Cries and sell pictures of people having their picture taken with her? I giggled while Mom asked, and just where would you take these pictures? In the mall, like those people were doing today. You know that you have to pay to have a business in the mall? They weren't working in a store. They were out on the concourse. That doesn't mean anything, Mom said. They still had to arrange to conduct business on the mall property and pay for the privilege. Shoot. I thought that we could make some easy money. Maybe you can, but you still have to pay the startup costs. Why don't you contact the mall office and ask them how much it would cost? Remember that people who just got the picture today aren't going to want it again. That's true. I guess it's the first people to do it who make all the money. Just like those pyramid schemes. The first ones make the money and the rest just pay out. I looked into them a couple of years ago when we weren't doing very well. Since Mom had made dinner, Carol and I cleaned up afterwards. She filled me in on the latest gossip as we worked. After dinner, we alternated on the phone. I called Debbie with my first call and we spoke for the full hour. Since I had already spoken with Brad, I didn't need my second hour, so I let Carol have it. Mom had done all of her calling during the afternoon while I was reading. Brad picked me up at 1:30 the following afternoon. I wore my disguise wig, but I also wore a corset, heels, and one of my tightest outfits. I wore the clothes just for Brad because he liked seeing me dressed that way, and since I had been gone for 5 weeks I decided to give him the treat. Brad lifted me up into the 4x4, as he usually did, because I couldn't climb in my tight skirt. He fastened my seatbelt and helped himself to a quick kiss. When we got to the Cineplex, Brad leaned over and kissed me the way that you kiss when you haven't seen someone in a long time. After a couple of minutes I had to push him away because I could tell that he was getting too excited. While he got himself under control before we got out of the truck, I fixed my makeup using the vanity mirror on the passenger side. Brad was walking a little stiffly as he moved around the truck to lift me out, so I knew that it was good that I had pushed him away when I did. He set me right down and we walked into the theater. Brad wanted to see a crime action movie titled Reindeer Games that was playing in Theater 3, and I didn't really care as long as I didn't have to sit through another long football movie. We picked up popcorn and soda on the way in and I served at the table so that Brad could put one arm around me and eat with the other. The movie wasn't very good because the plot was confusing, but it had some redeeming value because the lead actors, Ben Affleck, Gary Sinise, and Charlize Theron did their best with the weak script. It was one of those movies where you spend an hour after you see it trying to figure out who was who and why they did what they did. After the movie was finally over, we went for pizza. Several of the boys from the football team were there with their girlfriends and we joined them. The guys talked about cars while the girls grilled me about my work in NYC. As soon as they heard that I had worked with Cole Griffith, they wanted to hear every detail of our time together. I coupled some facts along with a few slight exaggerations to give them what they wanted to hear and probably enhanced Cole's reputation in the process. Brad took me home just before 5:30. We sat in the truck and kissed for a few minutes before he went around and lifted me out so that I wouldn't be too late for dinner. I gave him one last kiss at the door and went in. Mom and Carol were just sitting down to eat when I came in. I wasn't too hungry since I had eaten a slice of pizza just an hour before and I was wearing the corset, but I sat down and nibbled at the dinner anyway. After helping with the dinner dishes I went upstairs and, with Carol's help, I changed out of the corset and put a sleep set on. Then I returned downstairs to watch the Sunday night lineup. Being mid-March, almost everything was reruns, so I went back upstairs and read from one of the books that I had picked up at the library until bedtime. I had another nightmare again in the early hours. I dreamed that I was being interviewed on the Letterman show and I was unmasked with my original identity. My friends from the community theater were brought out one at a time and they identified me as Carrie. Even Mr. Tucker was there to point a finger, but the worst part was when Marge and Barbara explained in detail how they had transformed me into Crystal. I was too shocked to even move and all I could do was sit there and cry. It was horrible. I woke up with a soggy pillow. I didn't know if it was all due to profuse sweating or partially the result of crying. Can you cry in your sleep? Whatever it was from, it was uncomfortable, so I switched pillows and got up to wash and dry my face and neck. I wondered why I was having nightmares again after having gone for quite a while without them. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access. Link in the comment, thanks.